Without further ado, let's get started with our first presentation of the day. In the next session, we'll take an inside look at the world of directing real-time cutscenes for massive projects like World of Warcraft, with some anecdotes including Heroes of the Storm and StarCraft 2. Seasoned cinematic director Sarah Delahanty from Blizzard Entertainment will share her journey on how she landed her dream job and insights into the cinematic magic, including her past works on WildStar, Lord of the Rings Online, and Dungeons & Dragons Online. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, gamescom! Welcome! Thank you so much for joining me today. I am stoked to be here. My name is Sarah Delahanty, and I am a cinematic director at Blizzard Entertainment, where my focus is directing real-time cutscenes for World of Warcraft. But before we dive into WoW, let me take you on a bit of a journey and share with you what inspired me to get into games, how I got my start in the industry, and the skills that brought me to Blizzard. And that journey starts here, with this cute little nerd, and the only girl I knew in middle school computer club and going to warehouse LAN parties. Now I could say, I followed my passion, but really, what does that mean? Growing up, my passion was all over the place. I wanted to build props or make practical effects, but by the time I was in high school, all that was going the way of the dinosaurs. But then I wanted to work at ILM or Pixar, and I was fascinated by stop motion and obsessed with The Simpsons. And of course, there were always the games. To say I grew up with them might be an understatement. And through the 80s and the 90s, cutscenes were far from the cinematic short films that we know and love today, but they always told a story and gave us a deeper glimpse into all these game worlds we grew up with. I even got to experience the rise of the full motion video, which you could say inspired me in other ways. But out of all the games I loved growing up, there was one that I kept coming back to, and that was Warcraft 2. I loved the gameplay, but it was the cutscenes and the stories that kept me coming back. These scenes brought this isometric world to life. And mind you, this was well before the age of YouTube, so if I wanted to watch these over and over, I had to boot up the game. I wanted to learn to make these, but I didn't really know where to start. They combined my love of cinema and passion for games in a neat little package. So I figured I either had to go to school for programming or engineering or art. And I chose art, surprise. So I attended the Rhode Island School of Design in 2002 and studied film and animation. And after college, like most new grads, I didn't get that dream job or internship, but I worked hard and built a portfolio up with just about any animation gigs that came my way, mostly contract work for educational TV or trade shows, much like this. And while it more or less paid the bills, something was missing. And I wanted to be part of something bigger, something I was really passionate about.
You are not prepared.
Maybe a little too passionate, considering my slash plate at the time. I saw games were evolving from a childhood toy to something bigger, a whole new form of entertainment. I mean, these were miles beyond what I was enjoying as a kid playing Warcraft. I was evolving too, and I wanted to tell stories, not just animate globes and graphs. And freelancing could be a little lonely. I yearned to be part of a team where I could learn and grow. And I saw that opportunity in the game industry. Now, this screenshot holds a special place in my heart. It's the very first asset I ever made at a game studio as a professional artist. A promotional wallpaper for Lord of the Rings Online, because we all got to start somewhere. And I started at Turbine Entertainment. And I worked across all their games. It was 2009, and my WoW habit combined with my animation experience landed me a gig as a staff production artist, creating trailers, cutscenes, dev diaries, character spotlights, tutorials, you name it. Anything that had gameplay, we worked on. We were a very small team, and as such, we pretty much did everything: editing, motion graphics, localization. It was a bit tricky, but we got the job done. And for these large group shots, we had to enlist help from across the studio. All this was shot live, none of it was programmed. So for anything where we had to get characters charging in for a group shot or a boss shot, we were directing them over mics and on the computer. All those years directing raids in WoW started to pay off. I fell in love with game capture for a number of reasons. It fulfilled my left and right brain sensibilities in a way I hadn't really felt since playing with Legos. It's one part live action, one part animation, a sprinkle of motion, special effects, and a hint of stop motion. Plus a whole lot of, how the heck are we gonna do this? And it brought me another step closer to where I am now.
Welcome to WildStar. This is DevSpeak.
So I moved across the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States, and joined the cinematic team at Carbine Studios, working on WildStar, where I took the lead on some more hefty gameplay videos. We had a great team, and it was an absolute blast to work on. I loved the aesthetic of the game, and we just wanted to have fun. And fun we did. We took advantage of the robust housing system and essentially used it as a backlot set to build out fun scenes or jokey little insert shots. Anything to add a little pop to any of our videos. Now sadly, if you know WildStar, it didn't last. But when I say it brought me one step closer to where I am now, I actually meant about 15 minutes down the road. Because just a few miles away, or kilometers, was the next destination on my career journey, and that was Blizzard. Woo! We made it, guys. This was my very first dev team photo, and while it's probably hard to see, I'm over here in the corner, grinning like a total fool. And this was just the Heroes and the StarCraft team, because that's where I got my start. I joined a small, dedicated crew working on Hero Spotlight videos, in-development videos, and StarCraft Commander videos. Pretty much any kind of gameplay videos these teams needed, I was a part of. But in addition to live gameplay capture, these games also had a little something the other games I worked on didn't, and that was a cutscene editor. And this might look familiar to anyone who's played around in the StarCraft 2 editor, as Heroes was built off of StarCraft 2. This allowed us to do things we could not achieve in straight gameplay, like adding a skybox to the background of our shots. Nothing here was composited. This was all built in the cutscene editor with layers with alpha channels to create parallax. And this allowed us to lower the camera down in an isometric game, giving us these cool hero shots. We could also build up backgrounds using various props across all kinds of maps. And as Heroes started having more themed events, I pitched an idea.
Bienvenidos a la catedral de las mejores batallas del Nexo. ¡Vámonos!
So everything you see here is all in the game. These are their taunt animations and their hearth animations. We just had fun with the camera angles, and we built out the backgrounds and the effects using anything we could find in the game. We learned to maximize the art we had and get creative when there was something we didn't. Now this Hanzo shot is one of those moments. In this video, we wanted these key art moments to kind of reflect the hero shots. And here, Deckard Cain is hanging out on the ground. Here he is on his tank. And then we also had Blaze, who was on the ground, having some guys in the background he's firing at. So those are pretty easy shots to come up with in the cutscene editor. However, Hanzo was jumping out of a helicopter. And if you know Heroes does not have helicopters. So I made one. And all it took was a door, some map props, a false stat effect, and a whirlwinding Sonya. And I had a helicopter. And of course, that handy skyplane in the background. So it's this scrappy ingenuity that is at the heart of cinematic design. It's what we in the biz call movie magic. Now, the work I've been doing on Heroes hadn't gone unnoticed. And so in 2019, I joined the WoW in-game cinematics team, and I was doing this exact dance as a Boomkin main. I love it when a plan comes together. Now, these are some of my first cutscenes I made for Shadowlands. Now, mine are playing in the game. None of them are pre-rendered. They're all driven by underlying code rendering on the fly, the same way as the whole rest of the game plays when you're running around, not in a cutscene. And fun fact, before Shadowlands, we only used Lua scripting to make these scenes. We had no cutscene editor, no sequencer. It was just code. And as an artist, this does not fill me with joy. But everything changed with Shadowlands. We finally had the timeline editor. And for the first time ever in the history of World of Warcraft, we now had a graphical user interface for creating real-time cutscenes. And it might look like a whole mess of lines and colors and dots and folders, but behind it all, the Lua code is still being generated. And to us, that's magic. Because we don't have to deal with writing this. We can focus on our art and the craft of what we do best. And it allowed us to really get more creative with our scenes and our shots and our cameras and how our characters moved, and putting in all kinds of crazy effects to make things that just either would have been impossible in code alone or would have taken so long to finish that it just wouldn't have been possible. So here's that same scene again, but this is from a more neutral camera angle. And you can see the cinematic camera kind of popping around the scene. And with each and every shot, the characters jump around because we want to set them up for the best framing and the best action and the best lighting per shot, which is very similar to live action. However, unlike live action, our characters come with a very limited set of animations. We only use the animations that are available to the characters in the game. And so one of the first things we do when we start a scene is see what animations we have per character. Because if a scene asks for a character to do a cheer, and that character doesn't have a cheer animation, things start getting tricky. But what we can do, using the timeline editor, is link these animations together. We can play with their speed, we can play with how they blend together. And that allows us a whole lot more flexibility than being stuck with just using one animation, another animation, another animation. And if we like the arm gesture from one animation and the pose from another, we can layer them together and change how they blend and interact. And doing this, we can kit bash animations and create something entirely new for our scenes. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term kit bash, it comes from the scale model community. And some of the most famous examples of kit bashing are Colin Cantwell's ships that he made for the original Star Wars films that has inspired countless more ships in the movies afterwards. And it's only more recently that this term has come into play in the game industry, not just for animations, but also for building out backgrounds, building out prop sets, and so forth. That said, thanks to advances in our tools, we've introduced custom animations into our real-time cutscenes, and this is the first one of those scenes. Anduin here was up-resed, re-rigged, custom animated per shot, much like our pre-rendered scenes. However, the difference is, in this scene, your character could be there in the scene with him experiencing the whole thing together. And by the end of Shadowlands, we had created 7 more animated real-time cutscenes. And with Dragonflight, you can expect to have even more cutscenes coming your way. You'll have to check them out in November. So, at the end of the day, why not just make every cutscene a high-end CGI extravaganza? Well, why is the cover of your comic book so much different than the art inside? Real-time cutscenes bring an added layer of storytelling and immersion to a game that, in many cases, would just end up being a whole bunch of quest text or a lot of chat bubbles popping up. And while there are absolute challenges to working in real time, especially when you can't just fix it in post, I believe the benefits we gain on the player side are absolutely worth it. Because games have something TV and film don't. And that's the players. And at the end of the day, games are all about the players. And as a director, it's the player who's always on my mind when creating these cutscenes. I'm constantly thinking about the W questions. whether it's a narrative-heavy scene or something just kind of more lighthearted and fun. The scene needs to matter. Otherwise, the player is just going to hit that escape key, the most dreaded key in all of cutscene design. And when I talk about directing cutscenes, it may conjure an image kind of like this, lording it over everyone. Or the reality of what I do, something closer to this. And while I might be at the helm guiding my crew to a safe voyage through launch, I'm surrounded by talented people, and we're all learning and growing together. At the beginning, I said my passion was a bit scattered. But all these things had something in common. From the details on a prop to the placements of a minifig on a cool Lego build, each one of these tells stories, and that was the heart of my journey to cinematic directing. I just needed to figure it out. Nearly a decade ago, at a previous company, I was doing too many things. I was juggling too many jobs to focus on any single one of them, and a good friend and colleague of mine took notice and asked me, "What do you want to do?" And I hemmed and hawed about all the different jobs I was doing, weighing my interest in each one, and he asked again, "What do you want to do?" And that's when it clicked, and I understood what he was saying. And I replied, "I want to direct at Blizzard." And once I set my sights on it, I found my path, and here I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing your
thank you.
story with us, Sarah. We have a couple of questions that came in through the Slido that I would like
Great.
to ask you now.
Let's do it.
All right, from someone anonymous, how do you decide which gameplay moments to turn into cutscenes?
That's a great question. So typically, it's a highly collaborative process where we're talking directly with the quest designers and the narrative designers that are creating the content for WoW. And through that, we try to figure out, would this moment benefit from a scene, or is it something that could be better served in gameplay? Because the last thing we want to do is take away a cool gameplay moment from the players. We also have to weigh whether or not would it be better as a higher tier, animated, pre-rendered piece, something that's more emotional. But generally, we just want to take moments that are really fun and exciting and give them a little more spice.
All right, we have another one. How is directing cutscenes different than directing movies?
So a movie, when you're directing it, that's the final thing. That's the final product. And that's what everybody is there to make. And as a director on the movie, it's certainly weighing on you, this has to be the thing, this has to be the thing that gets people in the seats. Now with cutscenes, it's just a small piece of the greater pie. And you have to keep that in mind. As a director on cutscenes, you have to be humble. You have to know when to say, we gotta trim this cutscene down because people, it's just going on too long. Or if you've found you have too many cutscenes during a gameplay moment, you have to be ready to sacrifice a few of those. You always have to keep the gameplay first in mind.
Thank you for that. And another one, what would you recommend for someone who has just started working as a capture artist?
That's a great question. That's where I started. Just learn. Always be curious. Always be testing things out. Go in, figure out if you're not gonna break things, don't worry about breaking things. Try out all the commands and, reach out to people and see what their tools and techniques are. The more you interact with other capture artists and other people who've done this work, the more tips and tricks you'll find, because it's a little bit of a magic to how we make the games work.
All right, maybe we can go down to this. You mentioned the dreaded escape key. This is from Carr from WildStar Games. Do you track what cutscenes are being skipped?
Oh, geez. There might be some data somewhere, but I personally haven't seen that data. But we always keep track of, forums and playtests. And if, during playtests we're finding that cutscenes are slowing down moments, or if they're, messing up a raid, we'll certainly address those and try to take into account what improvements we can make during those.
All right, lastly, how important is mocap for WoW animations, would you say?
Ooh. So, fortunately or unfortunately, WoW just isn't set up for mocap these days. Everything in WoW is hand animated, and it really lends itself to the game. A lot of games these days are using motion capture, but most of these games are much more realistically driven. Something like Call of Duty is very heavy with motion capture. But for WoW, with so many different types of characters, you have dragons, you have, six-legged creatures, you have creatures with wings. And just the way these characters move is much more fantastical rather than rooted in the real world. So it's something that we may explore in the future, but, we're still hand animating everything for now, which is where our heart lies with WoW.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much for your talk and also answering all those questions. Let's give it up for Sarah one more time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Z.